Hi, I'm Karen Johnson here at StarWest 2012 with Scott Barber. Thanks for taking some time out.
No problem.
So what are you doing at StarWest this year?
Well, to be honest, I wasn't supposed to be here. I was supposed to be in Bulgaria, but some plans changed. There was an entire track of a conference that got kind of cut after the planning, so I had been at Whopper last week, workshop on performance and reliability, our 19th edition. 10 years of Whopper. So I asked what I could do to allow myself to grab a snack here and there, and so I've been doing some track sharing and helping out here and there, but it's been, I'll tell you, it's been really kind of nice to have a bit of an open schedule and get to see people instead of just running from one commitment to another.
Yeah, you're like rubbing that in, because
I know.
I'm like all over the places.
Been there.
Yeah, okay. But any observations you've made at this conference that you...
A couple. So I've noticed, really, maybe over about the last year, conference attendance across the board has been going up, and I'm glad to see that. I really was kind of concerned for a while that it just wasn't going to come back, that it wasn't just an economy thing.
Right.
And I'm also noticing just, collaboration and interaction with vendors has changed dramatically. And it might seem strange to say that is related to a conference, but I feel like the engineers and the developers and the geeks, if you will, I say that with all affection, I call myself a geek, have got more of a role in the direction and the helping hands of the tools and the vendors these days, and it's great to see.
That is a good thing. I like that, actually, because they make tools for us, and if they weren't here to sponsor the event, I don't think the events would happen, right? So we actually need them.
Yeah.
Necessary evil, can I say that? I don't
know.
Yeah. I was in Boston not all that long ago, and Perfecto Mobile gave me a tour of their office and took tons of feedback. And I think you're right. Like, if you can get the ear of a vendor and give them a list of things that you want to see, it's a good thing. Like,
not so long ago, they used to hold their focus group meetings in which they'd give you a demo, give you a form to fill out, and as soon as they handed you the form, they said, "Oh yeah, and free drinks in the next room, and thank you for your feedback," in which your feedback was yes, yes, no, where are the free drinks?
Right.
And now they are very much going out of their way to engage, to really listen. And I've seen more changes that came as direct results from conversations that I or some of my friends or coworkers have had with vendors just in the last year that I think I've seen in the previous 10 years combined. So I'm not sure why. I just like it.
I'll speculate that they too know the term shelfware.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be that. And that the economy's been really tough, and that they know they've got to provide a value, because people like you and I will not be shy to say,
no,
yeah, that tool doesn't work.
No.
Yeah. So.
Try to be polite, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it.
Yeah, no, same. So I agree. This is the most attendees I've seen in a while. It's a really vibrant STAR this year. It's cool. It's good to see, because to me, I take it as a market indicator.
Yeah. Lots of very engaged people with poignant and relevant questions. Although I am seeing, I chuckle because I don't know if you're aware, in 2002 I co-wrote a paper with my then office buddy Chris Walters about test automation and performance testing in mobile.
Oh, you're kidding.
2002.
I didn't know that.
The company I was working for, that was their speculative market. So, and we ended up testing, I think I'm allowed to say this now, it's been a long time, I was testing the WinINet implementation on the then BlackBerry pager. So basically the piece of software to enable it to go from the pager to the first version of the BlackBerry. Oh yeah. And we were doing it on behalf of the carrier, which was even more interesting. But so they send us 2 pagers and 2 of these things. They were prototype BlackBerries. I don't even remember what they were called, but and here we are trying to figure out how to run all these tests on these little devices and they sent us an emulator, and we're like, okay, that's kind of cool, but how do we know it works on the device, right? It's the same questions we're asking now. How do we, and so we did a whole lot of automation against the emulator, more to figure out what to test than to focus on the test results. Mm-hmm. And then we finally figured out that what we, aside from the manual testing, the way to go was it wasn't quite jailbreaking. They had the docking station that would sync.
The cradle.
And we ended up driving scenarios through the cradle for the functional stuff. And then for the performance aspect, we realized very quickly that the answer was not get a whole bunch of devices and do stuff, because especially, we're talking long before 3G.
And hard to get.
Yeah, and the carrier would have shut us down. Oh, you're clogging our tower. So we had to figure out the architecture. And, at the time I described it as, instead of your laptop, right, having a network cable into the wall that then goes to the internet, here's what you've got. You've got a device that does magic electromagnetic waves into the sky to a tower to the same place in the internet. So what we figured out is you can take the carrier out of the equation and go straight to that I called it a server at the base of the tower. Okay. Physically it wasn't, but conceptually.
Right.
And that way we could do the load and performance testing of the back end that was in their control. And of course their question was, yeah, but how do we know if a whole bunch of people are doing stuff in this area, if it's going to be any good? And my answer at the time, and still is today, is write a contract with your carrier and get the lawyers involved, because what are you going to do?
SLA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just funny that, we were kind of forced. I say forced. It was an exploratory area for our company, so we were given a lot of time and leeway that we don't have today as people are trying to get things out the door to figure this out. But it's interesting that you take that architecture thing, and then you take what we used to know as the browser platform problem, right?
And it's still going on, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. And now it's the same thing, except instead of a bunch of computers, now we have a bunch of devices, and it's a whole lot harder to have, 7 virtual images and reboot it to a new thing each time. So, it's...
yeah, I keep saying I want Ghost for mobile.
For mobile, yeah.
There's utilities that I miss from the desktop that we finally figured out, like Snagit, right? Give me a simple screen capture. Give me an ability to wipe this device clean. Like, I want these things over again, right? I don't know why we're not there. I don't want a big whomping tool. I want some cool utilities.
Yeah. Well, it's one of many examples where the same old problem rears its head just over here this time, and we've thought about how to solve these problems. Conceptually, we know how to solve them, or at least well enough to have gotten us this far, right? But now we've got to figure out the implementation.
Right.
And so I think as long as we're doing a good job of asking the question that way, right? How do I do the testing that's always been satisfactory? How do I at least get up to that in this new environment, this new world, these new devices?
Now it's mobile. Right?
Yeah,
but
I think that's the key question. I don't think the testing is all that different. I think the implementation is all that different.
Yeah, I agree. There's some fundamentals that are the same. I see that in mobile, right? Like, I'm still doing some amount of functional testing. I'm still doing some things that, you don't throw out everything you've learned from the past, but some things shift.
Yeah.
So I would be remiss if I didn't ask you what is new and what is going on in the world of performance testing.
Well, I'll tell you. So like I said, just got back from Whopper, and mixed feelings, right? Because this was now it has recently become the longest running peer workshop.
That's cool.
We lost the original.
Right.
And so we started this one out. We dug up the findings from Whopper 1.
When was that? It was 10 years
That was 10 years. That was 10 years ago.
Wow.
This last weekend.
Wow. Okay.
So right before my son was born, which is why I remember.
Okay.
And we dug up the findings, and Paul read them, Paul Holland, and we all agreed, everybody in the room, all 20 of us agreed, all still true, all still unsolved.
Ooh, then they were good questions.
Yeah, well, I had mixed feelings, right? I'm like, wow, we were on the ball 10 years ago.
Right.
Right? We knew what was going on. But why is this still a problem? And, you know, so many of them are more or less understanding, education, focus-based. You know, the continual advancement of hardware rescues us time and time and time again. Someday it won't. At least that's my prediction. But what I'm seeing today out in the market is, at least for me, I have finally, I think, figured out how to articulate the really important parts that people are missing, right? Everybody knows that they should be doing some load and stress testing.
Right.
The degree to which they do it is, really, it's a decision, right? And some people invest more than others, and hopefully that's commensurate with the degree that performance is important to them. You know, I'll reiterate the hopefully, right?
There's some stories in there.
Sure. Oh, there's always, I couldn't make some of these stories up. But the part that they continue to miss is the fact that, you know, for all that we can't test in quality, right? At least if you're talking about code, if you get to the last minute and you find a showstopper, and you have the super smart coding hero who's willing to work all night, heroic efforts can solve the problem. I'm not saying you want to.
Right.
I'm saying I've seen it happen so many times. But here's the difference with performance. You find that out at the last hour. You can call in a coder all you want, but they're not going to bring another server. They're not going to be able to say, oh, really? I guess it really was a bad idea to use MySQL. Maybe we should have used Oracle. Right. Not to promote one thing over another.
Right. But it's a little late.
But those kinds of decisions you don't fix in 6 hours.
So what do you do when, I'm going to guess you get called pretty late in the game a lot, and you see it?
I get called for two reasons. Most of my consulting engagements are what I call project rescue.
Sure.
Which is actually kind of fun because I get to go in and be the hired bulldog and just I ignore all policy and all everything and just get it working and hopefully get it working before they're tired of me being a bulldog in their house. But so be it. So that's fun. But at the same time, right, the kind of role I've taken in the industry is I want to keep people from getting there. And so the other part that I get is, and it's really the same thing, whether it's precautionary, right, early, or we've recently recovered from a failure, how do we keep this from happening again, right?
Yeah.
And the message is so very similar to all of them, and it's this. Performance is, just like Agile, performance is a culture. And if performance is going to matter, at every tiny, itty-bitty little step of the process along the way, there's something that you can do or some question you can ask. And what I'm teaching, the example I use is unit testing, right? Everybody unit tests, right?
But do they unit test for performance?
But almost nobody puts anything related to performance in their unit test. And here's the really scary part to me. JUnit, most of the other frameworks, have those asserts, if you will, already built in. So just imagine if every time you run a unit test, just for an example, your object, function, method, doesn't matter, spits out a time that it spent. And it's going to be some tiny little time, and who knows if it's good or not, but spits it out into a file, right? And once a week, developer opens up that file in Excel or whatever and looks at the trend. Right? Mm-hmm. And if it's flat, it is what it is, and until we know more, that's fine.
All right.
But if you look at it, and on Wednesday, it went from way down here and took a big jump up there,
right.
Hey, that's an indicator of, if I didn't expect that, maybe I should go look at what I did on Wednesday.
So do you educate clients on doing that?
Yeah. And the great thing is when I talk to testers, they're like, oh, no, I'll never get my developers to do. if I can get a developer in the room, they're like, whoa, 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 really?
Say
Hold
that
on,
again.
hold on. And in the amount of time it just took me to explain that, they're in their code, they've added one, they're like, hey, that'll work.
That's very cool.
And there's so many just little pieces. Do the same thing with your build validation tests. Integrate page timers into your regression suite. And again, a lot of times we don't know what's good or bad yet, right? Because these are tiny little components.
I feel like you need to show up intermittently for clients. Do you do that?
Actually,
Intermittently,
that's kind of how I structure it,
Yeah.
Let's do a week of learn what's going on. Let me go away and let you decide where you want to, where we want to go. Let me come back and help you build a strategy. And the way I work it is, I tell them for up to 4 weeks, your choice, same price, anytime during the next year, you hit a roadblock,
Yeah.
I'll come help you get over the hurdle. Because my goal is to help them be self-sufficient.
You just have to hope that you're not your own performance problem.
Yeah.
That you have 5 clients who want you heavily in the same, but we all know that whole
Well,
drill.
right now it's very interesting. Since July, apparently there's been some up-and-coming changes in healthcare. And so a whole bunch of things that
Yes.
These healthcare data providers or storage, basically if you have healthcare data, it affects you, and I need to go find this thing because since July, I'm just getting call after call after call after call from big data healthcare saying, hey, by 2014, we have to be performant and secure. Help us create a program.
So you have your own like Y2K going on.
Yeah,
to
more or
figure out
less.
like what the bubble of that is.
Yeah. So,
Oh, interesting.
and it seems like so far I've been lucky, right? In the sense that whether it's different markets, sometimes it's different geographies, and if I had 2 more employees, I'd have starved a long time ago. But I've been
Comes
okay
in
so far.
waves.
Yeah,
Comes in waves. We've seen it. Interesting.
Yeah. So, but that's it, right? And it goes along with the whole Agile trend, right? People ask, how do you performance test in Agile? Well,
Right.
the answer is you performance test the way you performance test. The question is, how do we transition from asynchronous to synchronous, right? How do we do it all at once in these tiny, small little bits and bytes instead of putting a big block of time at the end and starting with the whole thing and working your way backwards? So all we're doing is we're kind of inverting. Instead of starting with the macro and working our way back down to the micro, my recommendation is start with the micro and build back up. And over time, you'll build the trends. You'll learn from your production monitoring what the levels of good and not good are. You throw in some alerts as you go, and you catch these things as you're developing.
Do you feel like, beyond worrying about Agile and worrying about the sprints, do you feel like some testing should just not even worry about the sprint? It's ILID testing, and it needs to be done, and it might not fit in this 2-week interval, and like whatever. It doesn't really matter.
So I've started talking about development, and I deliberately use these words that aren't affiliated with one of the software lifecycle popular models. I talk about developing, I talk about integrating, preparing or staging, depending on how you look at it, and production. And I don't actually care whether they're happening concurrently, separately, same people, different people. But here's what I know: you gotta make the bits and bobs. Then you gotta put them together, right? And I don't care if you're making a car or if you're making software. You can't take the car for a test drive till you put the bits and bobs together, right? You can do a lot of modeling, a lot of testing. You can make sure the steering column's right, the radio works. But you're not putting somebody in it and putting it on the car and driver test route until you've put the whole thing together.
But it doesn't mean you haven't thought of performance.
That's right.
I want to be
That's
careful
right.
there. Yeah.
So absolutely, in that regard, there are absolutely pieces that, again, like I said, whether it's happening close together or, if there is a line, like in manufacturing, there are some things that you need all the pieces. And, I normally try to shy away from the manufacturing model, but one of the things that we don't talk about in software that that I learned about back in college is something called productization. You take an idea, right? We talk sometimes about that minimum viable
The 1.0
product,
of it.
right? Or prototypes, right? And you make it good enough for a beta or whatever. Now you know you have a real product idea. You go get your venture capital, right? I mean, this is how the business works. And then you polish it up, right? Now I turn it into a saleable product as opposed to a functional one. We don't talk about that much in software. And I often wonder why. And so I really encourage people to think about those ideas. I got to build it. I got to put it together. I got to build the pieces. I got to put it together. Then I've got to make it saleable.
I think a lot of it is because people get separated from that.
Yeah.
You know, they're focused on their part of it. It's like, you know, I don't make a car, right? I make a door.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And software is not quite as separable.
Can I ask you one last question? I think I have time. Okay. She said yes. So there's 3 words. I made a joke about this earlier today. There's 3 words going on. I know it's going to be a hard one, but mobile, agile, and cloud. Those are like the 3 hot words. If you can fit those in somewhere, you're good.
Yeah.
So any comments on how those 3 situations, what you're hearing in terms of calls to you in regards to performance testing?
Well, I've been joking that the future of our industry is cloudy agile DevOps. Somebody will come up with a better name for it, right? But that's where at least all the non-regulated, they're in finance. If you're building a finance app and by law you can only upgrade once a quarter,
right,
you're doing something different. Understood. Everybody else keeps shifting more into this collaborative team, cloud space, and absolutely mobile. And that, it's just real. It's just where people are going. And so to be honest, the agile and the cloud part, they don't scare me. They don't concern me.
Okay.
There's precedent for agile. Cloud's just, hey, you know that server room we've got in the basement? Let's not worry about that anymore. Let's just pay somebody else to deal with it. And I know that sounds overly simplistic and somebody will argue with me, but I've been to the cloud, a cloud provider. I'm not allowed to name them, but in Phoenix, it is the most secure. I was in the Army, Karen. I used to have to inventory the 101st Airborne Commanding General's equipment. I wasn't even allowed to know what this stuff did, okay? So I had this crazy clearance, and I had to get in these super secure areas. And it's nothing compared to the physical security in these clouds. It's amazing.
Kind of like a tour.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Oh, it is. It's really cool. But so, there's some concepts related to that. There's some comfort level. There's some understand. But at the end of the day,
kind of makes sense.
It all kind of, we take.
But what about the mobile part?
The mobile part's a little more interesting. And here's my real thinking, right? And it goes with another piece that nobody's talking about, which is the business model. So mobile, the whole idea of mobile is you're connected anywhere, anytime, right? And part of what happens with that is people push patches and updates all the time.
They do.
Now, where have we ever had a business model like that before? And if you go out and you get a new dishwasher, you don't expect to wake up tomorrow morning and have the buttons a different color. And the morning after, have a little blinky sign that says, "Ooh, your water stream is more efficient now because we."
Right.
I mean, really, I would freak you out.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
How do we know what's a patch versus what's an upgrade that you need to pay for? What's a service? What's a product?
I'm probably one of the few that reads those things sometimes on my device, right?
Yeah,
like what's going on.
Everybody else just window.
Right.
Okay. But you combine that anything that's not connected right now is only because nobody's figured out how to bundle it in a way someone wants to pay for it. There's no reason not to. I joke with my kids that, hey, I'll just go out and get a mobile chip and stick it in your shoe.
Oh, they do that, actually.
See?
Yeah.
See what I know?
Yeah, no, you can get an RFID chip buried in the bottom of a Nike sneaker, and then it can track how far you've run, and it can feed back to a mobile app that will keep Yeah, no, it's already
See?
done.
So my kids are already convinced that I know all that. But the bottom line here is that's not slowing down.
No, it's not.
And so it's not just a shift of we need to also be mobile. My question is how far in the future is it before we're only mobile?
That's interesting.
And that's where for in
That's another
performance
generation, I would suspect, that will
probably.
grow up that way.
Yeah, but I have to, when I think about performance, I think, what does that do for things like ISPs? How, right? And connectivity. So that's what I think about when I'm thinking those things.
Wow. Scary future stuff.
I know.
All right, well, I think we're out of time, so thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Karen.
All right.
My pleasure.
See you.